All right, well, it's 3 o'clock. Looks like we got 59 people on right now. We might get a few more, but we'll go ahead and get started. Hi, everyone. This is Tim McCoy. I'll be this meeting moderator. And just want to welcome you all to this Zoom meeting with the Southwest District staff and any others that may have joined us from other districts. Before we start, I would like to provide a few reminders. We're going to try this with everybody's cameras on, but if we start running into audio issues, especially, we'll try to flag that. And if we start running into them, then we'll go ahead and have people close that down. In terms of your audio, if you mute that while the director's talking, that might be helpful. If we can keep the video up, we'll keep it running. The general format we're going to have is pretty simple. We'll start with a message from the director, Jim Douglas. Then I'll ask Jim. We've got some frequently asked questions, and we'd ask you to listen to those before you start generating your own. We've got a fair number of questions that have been pretty consistent that are major concerns and questions from across the agency that we'd like to get that information out to all of you. And then we'll open it up for live questions. If we can keep Zoom running, we will, if you're on Zoom and you know how to use it, you can use the raise your hand function in Zoom and we'll call on you. At which time if your video is already on, just turn your audio on and ask a question. If we've had to shut video down, we'll ask you to open that back up. If you're on Zoom, you can also ask a question through the chat box. Just let me know who you are and I'll call on you. And then you can get your question. You can go ahead and we'll have you, again, turn on and ask your question. If you're calling in via phone, we do have an option in place to text a question. And anybody can do this, even if you're on Zoom and this is the only way you can get it done. 402-429-8671. And I'll try to repeat that when we start to open questions. Include your name and your division. Christy Firestone's actually taking those text messages and she'll shoot them over to me through the chat box in Zoom because I'll be watching, I'll be watching for hands and watching for questions and try to get you so you can, from the phone, know that, we can call on you and you can ask your question. We have scheduled an hour for this meeting. We know all your time's valuable. We appreciate all you participating. And we will be recording all of these Zoom meetings and we'll provide a link to them on the agency staff page for viewing later. With that, I will introduce our director, Jim Douglas.
Thanks, Tim. There's a lot of participants that I can't see, and I don't know if that's anything to do with my particular situation with my iPad or whether or not they're just choosing not to be visible. So as Tim said, you can try turning your cameras on, and if we have any problems with too many of them on, then we'll do something different. So the first thing I wanted to do is thank all of you for, as Tim did, taking time today to participate in this communication that we're doing. We think it's important that in all cases and all times that we hear what our employees have to say. I'm going to also, at this early stage of our conversation, welcome our newest commissioner, Donna Cush, to this meeting. And Donna, if you'd like to say hello to the almost 60 people that we have on this call, go ahead and take this opportunity.
Thank you, Jim. I appreciate it. And hello again to Tim too. Thank you, everybody here. I'm glad to be joining in and to be able to listen in and learn a little bit more as the newest commissioner, and very honored to be joining this and look forward to learning more from all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. So I was mentioning that we want to hear what you have to say. When we have new employee orientations, I always make several different points, and one of them is that we want to hear from our employees, and we want to hear from our employees under any circumstance, not just in these kinds of trying times that we're in right now. And we want to hear you if you have a better idea on how to accomplish our goals and our mission. We want to hear from you if you have an issue that needs addressed. We want to hear from you if you think you're not being heard in your normal places. So with that, I'm going to just say a few things to get started. We've now talked to I think around 250 people on this format in the last couple of days. And one of the things that we're finding as we're in this trying time that we're in, this challenging time, is that this kind of communication sometimes works out pretty well for a variety of things. I've been on many such calls, not just a large one like this, but smaller ones. We've been collaborating and doing a lot of planning, as you can imagine. We've been doing a lot of planning with the administrative leaders on how we operate and continue to operate efficiently with the challenges that face us. And I'll have to say that I'm really proud of everyone and how well we've continued to serve the public with the challenges that we have. I want to thank all of you for that. You know, I think we've always been sort of an innovative and adaptive agency, and it's serving us well right now because we're certainly need to be adaptive. When we do planning, usually we're making many assumptions, and often it's fairly easy to, with some confidence, to make the assumptions that we need to do good planning. In the current situation, it's harder. It's harder to assume, you know, what's going to happen with the spread of COVID, for example, 60 days from today. And a lot of things, a lot of plans are intended to guide us farther into the future than what we're able to plan for right now. Some of the things that we have done recently in the COVID response arena is as soon as we are made aware of the challenge that was facing us and facing the nation and the state and Nebraska citizens, we developed a COVID response plan, and that early plan primarily dealt with, okay, how are we going to immediately try to lessen large group sizes, not only with our employees, but with the public that we invite into our park system and our wildlife areas, et cetera. And that served us well in earlier days. As time went forward, you know, we needed a more sophisticated plan. And so we had a planning team at the headquarters that also conferred with many of you in the regional level. And we developed a continuation of operations plan, which is a lot more elaborate and a lot more specific. That particular plan also, though, has adaptable aspects to it, so we can use that plan moving forward, even with other kinds of emergencies, such as, you know, massive tornadoes across the state, or even some of the flooding situations like we had last year. So some of the silver linings that are associated with our current situation is we're learning about how to use technology to communicate with a wider array of our employees. We're learning about the plans that we really need to face these kinds of situations, and we're developing those plans. I want you to know that as we do the planning that we're doing as it relates to COVID response, we have your well-being in mind, your safety in mind, and also the well-being and safety of the publics that we invite to use our facilities. And in doing so, we keep in close contact with the governor's office, close contact with the regional health directors in Nebraska. There's regional health districts in the state, and each one has a director, and we've conferred with them extensively as the questions come up about traveling from one part of the state to the other, or how we try to to socially distance ourselves and our publics in the variety of ways that need to be done. As we look at the plans, we have some plans that we're doing right now that concern things that need to be done to accommodate safety for you and for the public if we start to return more of our workers into office situations. We currently have some people still working out of our own offices, and our offices are a lot different across the state. I'll get into more of that if questions arise about that. But know this, we're proud of you for how well you're serving the public under the conditions you're serving. We want to hear from you, and we do have your best interests in mind in all the planning that we do. So with that, I'll just turn it back to Tim, and probably the most productive way to go about this is to answer questions. I can't hear you, Tim.
Apparently I muted myself. There was a fire truck going by a while ago. Is there a tentative date for when we can return to the office?
As I mentioned, we have people currently working out of the Lincoln office, and it's a very reduced workforce. We've made some, it's been easy to make accommodations for a greatly reduced workforce in a large building, but we have different office situations across the state. We have district offices, and all the district offices aren't configured the same with the same kind of spacing for the public or for employees. We have offices associated with major parks such as Ponca State Park, Mahoney State Park, Fort Robinson State Park. So we have a lot of individual office planning to do. What we're doing right now, we've been engaged in this planning intensively for the last several days with division leaders, as we're taking a case-by-case approach into the assessment and planning of accommodations that we need to make in office spaces to make it safe for employees. And we're first looking at that from an angle of having more employees return back to office spaces. But then, you know, the other question is, what accommodations do we need to make when and if we allow the public to start using those office spaces again? And there's two different plans that need to happen under those circumstances. We're looking at a lot of different aspects of the offices. For example, how could we maintain the proper spacing between people working in an office? What kind of air ventilation system do particular offices have? Is it recirculated or exhausted? Is there availability of putting filters on the air intakes and outtakes, et cetera? In the main Lincoln office and maybe some of the parks, we might be looking at some touchless hardware for bathrooms and so on. So there's a lot of details to put into the plan. We're also looking at what protective personal equipment we would require for personnel that are returning back to offices. And then of course the same thing if we have a time in the future where the public returns to that office. So there's actually a lot of planning going on. So we don't have a date yet, and it may not be the same date for every office situation.
All right, the next question. Have there been discussions of when we start returning to the office, if it will be incrementally with only a percentage of staff returning?
Well, as I mentioned, we're in those planning stages now. Before I forget, I want to let you know that you'll be getting an inquiry soon to participate in office setting assessment. If you're a person who works out of one of our offices, you'll be part of the equation, and we talk to each individual employee about what their desire is. You know, there's some employees who are finding that, gee, I work just as efficiently in my particular function from home as I was in the office, and I might want to request that I'd be allowed to work from home or part-time from home. So there's a lot of those things that will go into the plan that we do, but you'll be asked in the near future about your office situation assessment.
As the state lifts restrictions to the working from the office, will Game and Parks continue to be open to more employees working from home for various reasons? And what might those reasons be? You already mentioned sort of their ability to be efficient and effective, but what are some of the other considerations we'll take into?
Well, I think it'll be, the answer is yes, we will consider allowing more people to work from home that perhaps have been working from home prior to the current health situation that we have. It will be a case-by-case basis. We'll look at whether the functionality of the position can be as maintained or enhanced by working from home. It'll be a conversation that occurs with the person in the position and their supervisor and HR. But we certainly are open to that possibility. And also there may be occasions where a person needs to come into an office setting only occasionally for certain parts of their function. And that would be taken into account as well.
Yeah, and I'll add to that, Jim. One of the things we always have been talking about is anyone who has underlying health conditions or people at home with those underlying conditions. I know we've been very consistent, and you've been very consistent in saying we will figure out how to accommodate those folks. That's really, really important to, I think, all of us.
Yes, thank you for that.
Well, would Game and Parks consider reasons of reduction of building use in terms of maybe less lights and water use and more worker output and happier employees to allow those that want to work from home?
Well, I think that the considerations that would, be most paramount would be those that I already mentioned about efficiency and effectiveness, but also we are concerned about the happiness of the employee and their ability to perform their functions and feel fulfilled and good about it. That would be a lot more important than any considerations about reduced utilities. There's probably not that many reduced utilities that would occur from a reduced workforce, but that wouldn't be a main consideration.
Next question. What will be some of the changes that will happen in the office as people return to work?
Well, for any phases that are more in the nearer future than in the distant future, we will likely require face masks to be worn in the offices. But additionally, you have to always think of this as the two situations, before the public use of the offices and then maybe after the public use of offices. Before the public use of offices, for example, we're more concerned about creating arrangements in office spaces so that they're distanced and distance can be maintained. And that's why you'll be part of analyzing your current office situation, if you're in one, to see what kind of, our engineering division will be looking at the layouts of the offices and so on and so forth. We may have structural changes that we need to make. As I mentioned, we're going to be looking at the airflow in offices, ventilation in offices, potentially inclusion of plexiglass dividers in certain situations, all touch surfaces, whether they can be improved, the sanitation that will be required and how it will be accomplished, etc. So we have a long list of things that we're considering.
Next question, will Game and Parks consider taking people's temperatures as they enter the building for staff or the public?
Uh, I wouldn't totally rule it out, but I don't think that it's high on our list of what we're thinking might be the conditions under which we would return more people.
All right. Next question, will the Game and Parks Commission potentially require the public to wear masks when they enter the building?
Again, depending upon the timing of the scenarios that we're discussing, and anything that would require the public to not be able to be pretty far distance from anybody else, yeah, we would require a mask.
You already covered that. Is there a plan to continue social distancing once we return to the office?
Yes, you know, even though, you know, I'm sure everybody's noticed that, you know, some of the health directives and the governor's executive orders that affect the behavior of people as they try to interact with their with businesses and the like, and services that they need. As those are relaxed, it's also evident that you know, a couple of messages from the governor are ones that we need to keep in mind. And one is that some sort of social distancing will be necessary and required for activities throughout the summer and into the fall. That's a statement that the governor has made on several occasions. And also, you know, through May, you know, there's a 10-person limitation for gatherings. Now, that number may change as time marches forward, but that number hasn't changed at this point. So, you know, we can only plan for, as I said, certain assumptions that we're trying to make, and it's hard to plan more than about 30 to 45 days in advance at the present time.
Next question is, once we return to the office, will there still be in-state travel restrictions?
Well, you know, when we return to the office, that date isn't certain right now. If we comply with the current health directives, the regional health directors prefer and advise us that it's not advisable to travel between health districts in the state. And of course, the governor still says, you know, don't travel unnecessarily, right? So a lot of those are admonitions and not necessarily laws that can be enforced. But, you know, you have to think about our activities and the activities we invite the public to participate in as sort of best practices. And right now, it's still the best practice not to take unnecessary travel.
Next question, could new employee orientation weeks still be accomplished this year if we use masks and use social distancing?
I don't know what the cohort number is for this next orientation session, but I would think that it would have to be at the least divided up into smaller cohorts than it has been in the past, and probably delayed as long as possible into the year. I don't think that it wouldn't be accomplished, I don't think, even well with masks if we use the same usual timeline and the same number of cohorts.
If the science shows that people are immune once they've had COVID-19, is it possible that the Game and Parks would do a testing policy on their own, even if it wasn't required by the state, to let people know they are immune and unlikely that they are carrying the virus to work?
Any kind of testing that we would do would be in concert with the state health officials. So I can't imagine we're doing any testing, quote, on our own. But, you know, my information is that we're still quite a ways away from knowing whether antibodies are going to provide immunity, and if so, for how long? So there's an awful lot of information yet to be gained about that. So very early to predict how that might be used in the state as we move forward.
How is the agency preparing for the possible second wave of the pandemic that we've been hearing about in the press?
Well, one thing about the steps that we've taken so far and the plans that we've made and are making is that we've had to consider the same kinds of questions now that we would have to consider or reconsider, if there was a, other reason to do so later in the year. And so that's the good news. I mean, we've learned a lot already about how to organize ourselves and remain efficient and effective with the kind of restrictions that we have. We've learned a lot about how to work with the Attorney General's office and the Governor's office if we need some kind of emergency order to affect what we would like to see. And we're already looking at what would we do and how would we do it if we had to remit any refunds, which we've had to do now if we were into big game season and we had to restrict that all of a sudden. We know a lot now about how we would react in the same kind of situation later on.
Well, you alluded to big game seasons, and we've had a couple of questions regarding that. So I'll give you the first one is, are there any plans or alternatives that we're considering for in-person check stations for a firearm deer season, should there be the need in the second wave?
What we're doing is developing a contingency plan, if you will. What regulations would we need to change? For example, if we wanted to go to all internet checking of big game, we allow other kinds of check-in, online check-in, telephone check-in, and so on, and for some things. But we'd have to change some regulations. We also are going to reach out to our check station operators. We only man a certain proportion of the check stations for deer, for example, and a lot of those are unmanned but run out of a gas station or something. We'd have to take into account what the will was of those persons to continue to run checks. There's also a lot of differences between checking elk during elk season, for example, where it's more of almost an appointment situation and a few animals that are maybe single animal and hunters at a time versus deer check. So and we also are in that contingency looking at how would we get the samples that we think we need for CWD surveillance and so on. So we're looking at all those questions, and we are making contingency plans.
In regards to deer check stations, there's also a specific question wondering if accommodations would be made for employees who have concerns about, in a second wave for their own health or for vulnerable family members.
Well, it's probably a good question to expand on the answer. And the answer is, it doesn't matter whether it would be a check station duty or any other duties that you have or obligations that you think you have to perform your duties or enhance the mission of the agency. We want you to be comfortable and safe in any of those situations. So not just check station prospects, but any prospects that haven't already presented themselves, that are currently presenting themselves for your work. We want to know if you have concerns and feel that it's not safe and that you'd like further accommodations.
And sort of the last one here was a question related to again the big game seasons. wondering in advance in terms of how do we help answer questions from hunters who want to know if they're planning their trips for the fall, if there's any plan to cancel any seasons.
We currently don't have any plans to cancel any fall seasons, and we do realize that if things got substantially worse during that time, you know, there may be a lot of things that we'd have to do that we don't know about right now. But we don't know that there's going to be the situation in the fall that required us to not take applications now. We do know that if something changed as we got closer to that time and we needed to do refunds, that we'd do that.
So here's sort of the opening back up for business section, Jim. When will overnight camping be allowed again?
Well, as you all probably know, you know, we started a phase in of certain allowing additional activities in the state parks. You know, we have a phased plan that we developed. We don't have dates certain on all the phases because, you know, we have to react to the changing situation with the transmission of COVID viruses. But the first step was a relatively easy one to make with the self-contained recreational vehicle camping. As we looked at that, you know, the camping spots are 25 foot apart. The number of people at a camping spot is limited. By having reservations, we know how many people we're talking about, and we could recontact anybody if we needed to recontact them. And also they don't put the pressure on our infrastructure, that all of which isn't open yet. So they have their own water systems in a self-contained camper. So they don't necessarily need to use a shower house. And we don't have those open yet. They don't necessarily have to use a modern restroom. We have vaults open. So that was the first phase. You know, as we're looking at the other phases on camping and how we would accommodate them and to what extent. And Jim Swenson is on, and Jim, if you want to make any further comments on that, go ahead.
Thanks for the opportunity, Jim. I appreciate it. The team, as you stated, has worked very hard to present this opportunity in this early phase, and we're excited to get some outdoor opportunities expanded for our visitors out there in combination with the grounds and the fishing activities, hiking and everything can occur. So there's more yet to come. As the directors indicated, a very cautious approach, and we'll continue to move forward under the present situation with his guidance. Thanks, Jim.
Thanks, Jim.
Next question, do we have any timeline on cabins being opened in the near future?
We don't have a date certain. Probably the primary thing that we're looking at right now is to maintain, you know, safe conditions for the public and also for our housekeepers. We're looking into what the hotel industry is doing and what some of the CDC recommendations are concerning the length of time the virus can maintain itself on different kinds of surfaces, so we would know what our cleaning regimen would be. You know, some across the hotel industry, unfortunately, there's a wide variety of ways that they're going about things, and so it's hard to determine the very best way. One of the best ways for us to consider reopening lodging in cabins, for example, or lodge rooms at Mahoney Park, is to probably think about doing it in a way where the rented cabin or room, after it's vacated, is left vacant for several days. And in which case we could have a rotating amount of cabins that were available at any given time, and others were in a rest stage, a combination of rest stage and then surface cleaning and linen and bed sheets and bed towel changing and so on would be required. So we probably, because of the intensive cleaning effort that would be needed, we also wouldn't have enough house staff to keep up right now to keep all the cabins open. So as we merge the ability of us to have the right cleaning methods, the right number of house staff, the ability to keep the house staff safe, and so on, then we'll be closer to setting a date.
Next question. We understand most efforts are focused primarily on when our agency programs and events might resume, but has there been any discussion of when outside organization or groups would be allowed to plan and hold events within our park system?
Yes, there has been. And, you know, I think we do have an obligation, whether it's an activity that we sponsor or whether it's one that another outside entity sponsors, we have an obligation still to look at whether the activity is safe for the public and safe for our employees. And but so we're applying sort of the same standards. And so, for example, right now there's no permits being issued for fishing tournaments. But we've got some requests to consider for what's the terminology, Jim Swenson? It's like a virtual fishing tournament, and the virtual fishing tournament, when we look at those protocols and so on, might be something that we approve. So we're using sort of the same kinds of standards that you still have to maintain. Right now, you have to maintain social distancing and group size, and so it depends on whether the outside entities function can maintain social distancing and group size and safety for for their participants and our employees.
All right. I've got other FAQs that we can move to. Some of those are pretty specific, but we have a couple of questions that I've already got people in the queue for. So Officer Brian Pernicki, you able to turn your sound and camera on, or just sound, and ask your question?
Yeah, I've had a lot of people ask questions regarding suspension of non-resident deer permits, which I think you kind of answered a little bit, that we don't have a plan at the time, but that is a question with being in the Frenchman unit, especially a lot of non-residents have called asking about that.
So what we're doing in that regard is what I mentioned. We're looking at the process that we would need to go through to do that if we find the need and desire to do that. And it's not as simple as some people think. We can't do all of those things administratively. We have regulations in place that preclude that. Sometimes we have statutes in place that preclude it. So it's a combination. Usually we go first in conjunction with the Attorney General. We look at our own regulations to see which ones would need to be changed, or orders, if it's orders. And there's different processes for that. Even under emergency meetings, there's some hoops that we have to jump through that aren't necessarily easy to do. In some cases, if it takes a statutory change, then the governor can consider an executive order to waive the statute for some time period. But normally those are only 30-day waivs. So it's actually a fairly complicated endeavor. And but so what we need to do is know what we have to do if we get closer to a time where we think it's necessary. So the simple answer to the people that want to know is there's a lot of legal obstacles, and so we're looking at it, but there hasn't been any decisions to do it at this point.
Thank you.
Next up, I have a question from Logan Epp. Logan, you want to get on and ask your question?
All right. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. My question was, do you foresee tent camping or campers without bathroom facilities to be opened up at some point in the future? We've gotten that call 3 times since this meeting started.
Well, it's something, yeah, I think so. But we have to, I think we're taking things one step at a time. And I noticed, we keep in close contact, and all of our administrators do as well, close contact with our peers in other states and compare notes on what's working, what's not, so on. I noticed that Iowa, they opened it up to tent camping, but, they had about 14 rules about it. And one of them was they had to bring their own porta potty, and, so it's like, part of it is I don't know about, their 14 rules, but I know our main rules would be the same as what we looked at with even what step we've taken so far. How would you make sure that they're maintaining good distancing, and make sure that there's not the right invitation to exceed group sizes, and make sure that people knew that they may not have the facilities that they would normally enjoy. So probably the next step on that would be probably some way to do it, but on a assigned area basis, assigned spot basis, and so on. So it will come. It's just, it's not step one.
So I don't have any other questions in the queue. I'll hit a couple of these other frequently asked questions. Next one I know has came up in several cases. Will the commission provide hand sanitizer and cleaning supplies for staff as we look to reopening office facilities?
Yeah, the answer is yes, and we have orders in. We only have a limited supply at the present time that we've acquired from different sources. There's a methodology and a pathway to get supplies through the state of Nebraska. We have made application for many gallons of hand sanitizer and vinyl gloves and the like, and we don't have those yet. So that's part of our not having a date certain question right now too. We have to have the accommodations done that we think need to be done. We have to have the supplies ready that we think need to be ready.
The next question: if staff cannot fully work remotely, meaning there are certain things they need to come to the office for some time, would we consider allowing them that ability to work from home at some points in time and to be able to be back in the office when they need to?
Yeah, I think again on a case-by-case basis, depending on the position and the view of the employee, the supervisor, and HR about whether the functionality would remain this good. There might be some part-time in, part-time out of the office, and all kinds of other permutations of that.
Scrolling through looking for hands up. I don't see any right now, so I'll ask another one, Jim. And I know this is one I think that's on a lot of people's mind. What are the impacts to agency funds that we're worried about and we're watching from the COVID-19 emergency?
So the greatest impact to revenue streams has occurred in the parks arena, but just as sort of a primer and reminder, our agency is less dependent upon general funds derived from tax dollars than most state agencies are. Only about 13% of our total budget comes from general funds. They're important, that 13% is important, but it's not near the the size of the funding that happens with other state agencies. So we're funded by, cash funds primarily that, and the revenue streams go into these different cash funds. For example, we have a park cash fund and a game cash fund and a habitat cash fund, and we have other cash funds as well. They're populated, those funds are populated by various revenue streams. And some of those dollars can't be moved into other places. In other words, park cash can only be used for park activities, not wildlife activities. And wildlife cash funds can only be used for fish and wildlife activities and some education and law enforcement, not for parks. So in the game cash arena, we took a reduction in revenue when we eliminated non-resident turkey permits. We normally would get a revenue stream of, say, close to $1.5 million from non-resident turkey permits. Now, some of those were sold early and honored, and we had to do refunds on some that wanted refunds. But it's likely that we may not have seen as many non-resident turkey hunters anyway this year as we might have. So when you're trying to look at how far down you are compared to last year, it's only an estimation. When all is said and done, I would say we're probably down $500,000, maybe $700,000 from that lack of activity. Of course, they buy habitat stamps as well, and that was like another several $100,000 hit. So the game cash fund is taking a hit, but then on the other side of things, more people are fishing this year with fishing licenses than have bought fishing licenses for the last three years. So that's good news, and so we make up a little bit of that loss in revenue through increased fishermen. On the habitat cash side, we're going to we get a lot of federal funds, and some of those federal fund streams are going to be higher. So I think that we can manage through at this point, barring something going south on us with big game seasons. At this point, we can manage through the revenue losses on the game cash side. It's also important to know that, in these cash funds, we have cash balances. We try to maintain a quarter to a half year's balance in operating funds in all of those cash funds. So we have some cushion there. In the park cash side, we get several $1 million a year in camping fees. We get several $1 million a year in park entry permit fees. Now, park entry permit sales are actually up this year, just like fishing permit sales are up. So that's good news, but they're not up enough to offset the lack of income from camping so far. We're a couple $1 million down in that regard. We're going to start having a greater revenue stream, several $100,000 a week from RV camping here coming up. But we will need to be really vigilant about our spending on the park side. And, we also, though, have not hired as many temporary workers as usual so far. We're going to have to really gear that up here pretty soon. But so we've saved some operating costs there. We're taking a close look at how we are using our different funding sources to spend on capital development in the parks. And so we're going to switch and not spend any park cash on certain kinds of capital development. And we're going to find other funds to do that capital development with. So we're managing already in light of the decreases that we've seen. At this juncture, we don't have reason to be overly alarmed, I guess I'd call it, but it's also not likely that we'll be asking for any additional spending authority in our next biennial budget. And it's likely that we will see some belt tightening, I guess I would call it. So that's a very general view. I can answer more questions than that if you'd like.
Yeah. Well, we've got time here, and we've still got time for questions. I don't have any in the queue, but if there's anybody that has a burning question that just wants to turn on their audio and ask it, you've got an opportunity right now.
We will be sending out also a survey on your thoughts on this opportunity and this way of communicating. I think we may find that we have a lot of other opportunities to communicate in this fashion, no matter what the situation is on the health crisis scene. So, but we're interested in your thoughts on that.
All right, I still don't have any questions, so I guess we'll go ahead and close this up. Thank you all for your time. We will place links to these on the staff pages of the recorded Zoom meetings if somebody wants to watch one of these later, or if you've got somebody you work with that didn't have a chance to participate in one of the 5 meetings. We hope you found it valuable. Like Jim said, we'll be sending out an evaluation. We want to learn more about how this works for you. And just at the end, I just want to make sure to thank you for all the work you're doing. We're doing amazing work and meeting our mission and doing it under some really uncertain times. And I think all of our staff out there, you have all done a great job of helping us serve the public the best way we can. So thank you guys so much. And if you end up having additional questions, the other thing is that you could still send those to Sherry. You know, we'll still take questions and help answer them or ask them to your division administrators.
And we'll have another meeting of this nature tomorrow. And, you know, you can participate in that as well if you'd like. And if you come up with comments or questions between now and then you could also ask them at that meeting.
Yep.
Appreciate everything that you're doing, and don't hesitate to move questions up the line also as we move forward here, not just in today's opportunity. So,
all right, thanks everybody.